Let's take a look at the 5 lessons we can learn from Barnes& Noble's mistakes while they were battling Amazon, because we can really glean a lot of information from that and how that would apply to a small owner operator, physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech language pathologist trying to compete with large corporates like NovaCare, ATI, or Athletico. But first, let's start with a little context around Barnes & Noble. So Barnes & Noble was actually officially started in 1917. They were a bookstore before that. 1917 is when they took the official name Barnes & Noble. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, they were the largest supplier of mail order books in this country. That's crazy. They used to send out catalogs for people to order books through the mail. They won the Guinness Book of World Record for having the largest bookstore physical location in 1974. So looking at some of their mistakes, I mean, they were positioned for almost 100 years before Amazon stepped into the market, yet they still lost the battle. I think number one, like the biggest mistake, the craziest mistake to me is they tried to compete with Amazon's Kindle by introducing the Nook. Clearly, they completely lost sight of their consumer base. Like, I love technology, I love devices. There's nothing that's ever going to compete with me picking up a physical copy of a book. Paper, the smell, the feel, the sensation, the look of the ink on the page, that is an experience. That's a consumer experience that I don't want to replace, even though there are great advantages to Kindle and online resources and, Control F to find certain things. It's just a different experience. It's apples and oranges. And why Barnes & Noble would try to compete with Amazon's Kindle, which already had such a significant market share. And really, when you think of the consumer that wants a physical book is going to go into a Barnes & Noble physical location store. The consumer that wants a digital product is going to go with Amazon, and hence they're going to buy the Amazon Kindle. So looking at how that relates to our business, the consumer that's going to go to an Athletico, an ATI, they're looking for a very different patient care experience than the experience a consumer would get going to someone like you. Because I'm assuming you watching this channel is like me. You focus on the patient care experience over everything else. You bring incredible knowledge. You bring expertise to the patient care experience that a typical, what we'll call a large consumer corporate-based physical therapy clinic is just never going to bring. So the customer, the patient who is happy going to ATI, Athletico, NovaCare, they are not the same client that's going to be happy and actively seeking out your service. Very different clientele, very different experience. Just because it's called the same thing does not mean it is the same thing. Mistake number 2, don't take battles on the opponent's field if you don't have to. Like the idea that Barnes & Noble was trying to move online, the idea that Barnes & Noble was trying to build their online presence to compete with Amazon is just absurd. Once again, Amazon was the Goliath. It was the behemoth. Nobody is going to compete with the money and the resources that Amazon was putting into building their online platform. The consumer who's going to buy a book from Barnes & Noble doesn't care about the online platform. These are very different customer experiences, and that carries over into our business models. Right? So I'm not going to try to mass market appeal like a large corporate clinic. I'm not going to advertise like a large corporate clinic. I'm not going to build a facility like a large corporate clinic. They have a very different business model and they're serving a very different community. I'm going to stick to what I do best. I'm not going to fight my battle on their turf. If you haven't read The Art of War, it applies to business. It's a phenomenal book. And really, these lessons are universal, right? If I don't have a competitive advantage, there's no way I'm going to step into that fight. So that was number 2. Number 3, what are you really selling? What is the consumer really buying? So when we look at Amazon, we're buying convenience, right? I can come into my office. I don't have to get in my car. I can pull up a browser, and in one click, I can buy what I'm looking for. I can sort by price. The environment to making a purchase is near frictionless because of my credit card information is already stored on the website server. Whereas when I go to Barnes & Noble, I'm looking for something very different, right? Amazon is about saving me time. I would rather buy something online and have it delivered the next day to save my time. Barnes & Noble is really about a place to spend your time. You're going in there for the sights and the sounds and the smells. You're going in there for the way that you feel walking into the environment, the decor, the look. You feel smarter. You feel good about yourself. I always say it's like, if you know what a Boston brownstone is, like there's a certain appeal and attraction to that kind of, I don't want to say majesty, but heritage. And it just makes you feel good. And so Barnes & Noble, if they understood what it is that they were actually selling, they do an amazing job creating the store, but they don't realize the value in what they've created. So for us, when a patient walks into my clinic, I know their name, I know their history, I know their neighbors, I know everything about them. A large corporate clinic cannot provide that level of service, right? And we have patients that return year after year after year. We never forget them. We always talk to them. They're always going to see the same clinicians. We're going to build that rapport, that long-lasting relationship. Where in some of the busier corporate clinics, they're going to have a different therapist maybe each time. They're going to work with different people. There's going to be turnover. So they never quite know who they're going to get, what the experience is. Think of the power of automation when it comes to food. Anybody, anywhere can walk into a McDonald's in this country and basically get the same experience, good or bad, whatever you decide, but it's the same experience. And so in our clinics, we want to understand what it is we're selling. I would say that I sell peace of mind. I sell community. I sell personal relationships and connections. I sell the feeling of this person cares and this person doesn't mind or actually wants to hear me talk about my condition, to share my feelings, my frustrations, my emotions, right? That's what we sell in small clinics all around the country. Whereas the larger corporates, they're selling a protocol. They're selling an automated experience that doesn't matter who it is, cogs in a wheel. If you're out sick today, I'm going to switch cogs and I'll find somebody else who's going to do exactly the same thing. Different consumer, different experience. But Barnes & Noble, like I said, when I go there, I'm looking for the personal enjoyment of the customer experience. When I go to Amazon, I'm just looking for convenience. Barnes & Noble has to capture that in order to be successful. What's your cash cow, right? Understanding where the cash is coming from, understanding what pays the bills. Every business has a cash cow, and usually it's not what you would expect. So in Amazon's case, while they started and they are a massive retailer, their cash cow, their profits really all come from largely their AWS, their computers and servers and the service behind other websites and other stuff that's going online. That's not what Barnes & Noble's is, and certainly Barnes & Noble's cash cow is not their books. Their books have about a 40% profit margin when bought in bulk and sold retail. 40% on a $12, $15, $20 book is not going to keep them in business. So if they move, or as they move into understanding what their cash cow is, now they have a huge real estate footprint. They have over $2 billion from one reference that I saw in real estate, over 600 storefronts that they own. That is a huge opportunity for them. That has a lot of power behind it. But back into the stores, they could continue to focus on selling books at a 40% margin. So they're going to make 80 cents on a $20 book. Or they can focus on growing their coffee sales. Many of the many of the Barnes & Nobles have Starbucks in them. Coffee, a typical profit margin on a cup of coffee is about 70 to 80%. Of course, what's nice about coffee is the marginal cost is so low that it's easy to bump your price up by $1 or $2. You could double or triple your profit margin on a cup of coffee really easily. But really what they should do is move into wine. Selling wine at a restaurant has a $200 to $300 profit margin markup. Imagine if Barnes & Noble started doing wine tasting and started having a wine bar and some other things that are super high profit margin, that have high ticket prices, that allow the consumer to really experience and enjoy the time that they're spending in the store. Because that's what Barnes & Noble has that Amazon doesn't. Barnes & Noble has that customer experience, the place to go. Like Starbucks created the third space. You have your home, you have your work, and you have Starbucks. Barnes & Noble could be that third space, but they have to monetize that. Now, nobody's going to pay rent to go to Barnes & Noble. I don't think business services like what some of the other kind of coffee shops have done, I don't think that's the direction for them to go. But I do think wine tasting, various food tasting, any of those kind of snobby, high value, high ticket experiences, I think is where their consumer base is going to be. And, back to from us as small clinic owners and operators, how do we differentiate? The same thing. Like, we could do little community events. We can bring in add-on services that have high profit margins, relatively low barriers to entry. We already have the space. We already have a consumer base, a bunch of patients who are dealing usually with something very specific, whether you have a chronic pain clinic or you have, like me, a post-surgical, where I pretty much know that a large percentage of my population are going to be coming after a total knee replacement. So wouldn't it be reasonable and in my best interest to have recumbent bikes and pedalers that I could sell or rent retail to individuals who have just had a total knee replacement? Aren't there concierge services I can offer to those clients where we go to the patient's home, or we do setups, or we have other things that are in line with what the patient is looking for, what the patient wants, and what the patient needs? Stuff that the large corporates couldn't do. They don't have the physical space to retail sell equipment, like recumbent bikes. I can put 5 recumbent bikes in my clinic that I either rent or sell that the other clinics really couldn't do. They don't have the systems in place to allow them to experiment in different markets. And then finally, number 5, I'm going to put this question on you. What do you think Barnes & Noble still possesses, still has of value, that would really just break them from this battle with Amazon? A battle that makes no sense, a battle that's pretty much lost, a battle that has gone on and pretty much crushed any potential that Barnes & Noble would have had in book sales. Where can they take their existing infrastructure? 600 storefront locations, beautiful design, beautiful in-store customer experience that Amazon can never replicate and doesn't have to offer. Where do you see Barnes & Noble turning things around, and how do you see your operation really leveraging its strengths to fight against the Goliath, which are the large corporate clinics that can offer basically the commodity of PTOT-SLP at the lowest possible marginal cost, because they have economies of scale, they have public funding, they have money in the coffers that you will never have access to, and they are positioned to win even if they lose money for several years in a row. I would love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys on the next video.